Hi guys, so Jacob Rees-Mogg channeled his inner Margaret Thatcher on a question regarding an extension to the transition period with the EU. Let's see what he had to say.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for asking this vital question, and I'm sure we can agree ensuring we leave the transition period successfully in full by the end of this year is one of the government and, even more importantly, the British people's highest priorities. An extension to the transition period would be neither in the UK's nor the Europeans' interest. Both parties want and need to conclude a deal this year.
So you're talking about concluding a deal this year. Now, Brexiteers like yourself have been talking about a Canada-style trade deal, but that's not going to be on the table. It took years for the Canada-style trade deal. You've also talked about an Australian-style trade deal, even though the EU and Australia don't have a trade deal. The EU have said you're not going to get a Canada-style trade deal because the UK is completely different to Canada. So that's not going to happen. And also, there isn't enough time for a comprehensive trade deal. So what is Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, in this particular case, Jacob Rees-Mogg, talking about? I think they're talking about something that I talked about in the past was a bare bones deal. Something that the EU would say, okay, you can have this bare bones deal. There's nothing really comprehensive about it, but it's something that the negotiators can bring back from Brussels and say, look, we have succeeded. We have defied our critics. We have a deal. It's not going to be a comprehensive deal. It's not going to be anything like the Canada-style deal. But it will be something to cover the arses of the negotiators and the government at the time until they're able to sort out the mess.
To complete the transition period. An extension to the transition period would bind us into future EU legislation without us having any say in designing it, but still having to foot the bill for payments to the EU budget. We must be able to design our own rules. It is in our own best interests, without the constraints of EU regulation. So I would like to assure my own friend and the people of Ashfield that the government is delivering on this promise. So to quote Margaret Thatcher, will we have an extension? No, no, no.
Will there be an extension? I don't think there will be an extension. Because you can be pretty sure that whatever the right thing to do is, Boris Johnson will do the opposite. So an extension would be a good idea if you want to have a comprehensive trade deal. But Boris Johnson isn't going to ask for a comprehensive trade deal or an extension because he doesn't want to do the right thing. So what will happen? Well, what could happen is that Boris Johnson's hand could be forced. So he may not want an extension in order to have a trade deal. But Parliament could force him into asking for an extension. Now, the criteria seem to be that in order to get an extension, it needs to be asked pretty soon. But there is a possibility that the UK could run down the clock to December and then ask for an extension. Now, I don't know whether the EU would give that, but it could be a scenario where Boris Johnson is forced to go to Brussels and ask for an extension. It's difficult to see that at this moment because he has a huge majority in Parliament and he's doing pretty much what he wants. But I have talked about how there would be a huge amount of pressure on Boris Johnson. The Tories are suffering in the polls at the moment, and it could be Boris Johnson's last throw of the die in order to save his career. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. But just to finish up on this, I think the UK will crash out without a deal. It's looking more and more likely. But, you know, there are always last-minute changes or last-minute requests. And Boris Johnson is extremely unpredictable. Let me know in the comments. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.